Okay, 359. Let's do this. All right. Let me make sure I mute my chat. Boom, boom, boom. All right. Today, we're looking at some properties that come on since the last 30 days. We're in 35020 in Bessemer, just a little southwest of Birmingham. Came across this property. This property looks relatively... Let's see. Let me pause this. Okay, so now this probably looks like a cute little house. The flooring looks great. Maybe you want to refinish it, but it looks pretty good for the most part. Don't even need to do much painting in this house either. Guess that's not some money for cleaning the place, but okay. I want to look at this property because it's good to know where these ARVs are heading around, because at 2881 square feet, this is selling for about $68 a square foot. What I've seen is that you don't really get that much of a premium above, let's say, 1,500 square feet from basically what I've seen for it. As the dollar per square foot kind of comes down. So let's analyze this deal and let's see what price or set of terms would make this a deal, quote unquote, right? So the first thing we always do is we look up the county that's in so that we can look up the rent ceiling. Now, this property is in Jefferson County. After doing a control find on the county keyword, what we're going to do is we're going to go to HUD FMR. We're going to Google HUD FMR. FMR stands for fair market rent. By clicking the first link, we're going to go down here where it says access to small area FMRs. Now, we'll click on FY 2025, small area FMRs, click on the state, click on the county, which is in Jefferson County. And you're going to see right here in 35020, the rent ceiling for a 4-bed is $1,580. So we'll do $1,580 for 35020. And then the rent ceiling for a 3-bed was $1,420. Yep, $1,420. Okay. Now that I got my rent ceiling here at $1,580, you got to understand that sometimes that rent ceiling also includes utilities. So if you were to charge way too much rent, right, and not cover utilities, I mean, your rent is not going to be $1,580 because you got to cover utilities for you to achieve that rent. So we have to determine what is the more reasonable rent. To do that, we have to figure out, okay, when I go to affordablehousing.com, I go to the owner section, I go to the market rent estimator, plug in the address, plug in the bedroom count. Well, looks like the average rent for 25 units within a 2.55 mile radius is $1,504. Let's write that one down. $1,504. $1,504 as a 2.55 mile radius, and I'm pretty confident that 1,500 is probably the number we're going to be leaning towards, not 1,580, right? Because that number also includes utilities. And just in case for those of you that don't know about the rent reasonable assess, I'm going to pull up the Housing Choice Voucher Program Guidebook. And on this property, you're going to see that on this HCV, Housing Choice Voucher, which is previously known as the Section 8 voucher, right? They rebranded from Section 8 because of all the negative connotation associated with Section 8. Okay? Now that we got there, we're going to go and focus on Section 2.2 in this guidebook, where it says that in conducting rent reasonableness, the PHA, or the Public Housing Authority, must determine whether the rent to the owner is a reasonable rent in comparison to rent for other comparable unassessed units. So this means that you can't charge more rent to somebody simply because they are a voucher holder. So obviously the size and unit type matters. And here's what we got to do next. So when you compare the lower of the two against the market rate, 1,500 against the rent ceiling of 1,580, you got to use the lower of the two, right? Because that's a more reasonable rent. So for our rental assumption here in B16, we're going to use $1,500 for today. We're going to plug in the asking price of 200, was it 195? 195, 195 grand. For our rehab number, we're going to delete this, multiply by 2 because that was from yesterday's scenario. We're going to go to the rehab calculator. We're going to replace the 3 toilets with high pressure flush toilets right here in row 132. I think all the other bathroom items can be taken out. I'm going to assume that maybe we've got to refinish maybe 500 square feet of flooring. We don't have to repaint the place. Again, maybe there's 100 square feet that we're going to do some touch-up in. Let me put that in there. We got $500 for landscaping, just in case there's any issues to keep the home pristine condition, so there's no code violations while you get it ready. And then we got $1,500 for the roof repair. All right, now that you got that in place, you got $67.80. All right, monthly income rents at $1,500. Our property taxes, which we're going to get right from Redfin, is going to be 87 right here. Obviously, you got to double check with your county assessor records to make sure you're charging the right price. So just make sure that you're always checking before you close on the deal. And then for our proper homeowner insurance is going to equals to 151, which is from this number right here. And I'm going to multiply it by 1.2, right? I'm multiplying by 1.2 because I'm adding a 20% premium to this property. Because if you're going to use it as a investment property, insurance companies typically view this as a riskier item, so they're going to charge you more money, okay? Now, my rest of my expenses, I got 10% set aside for CapEx, maintenance, etc. Right? This is money that you set aside every single month because this money doesn't belong to you, right? I just got a bill for a roof replacement for 15 grand. And if you didn't set aside $150 for 100 months and you get that bill, you would have been overestimating your profitability because you underestimated your expenses. Well, in that scenario, guess what? Not a good position to be. So don't be that person. Make sure you're always setting aside money every single month for maintenance. Then you got set aside 10% for property management. I got 5% set aside for vacancy. I got 25% set down for the cash of the seller. And then for my closing costs, I got $48.75 with $67.80 for the renovations reserve. And now all of a sudden, if I am financing this property, right? So my down payment is going to equals to my asking price in B4, multiplied by my down payment percentage in F19, 2.5% for closing costs, which is very typical. For my financing amount, is going to be equals to my B4, my asking price, minus my cash to seller at $47.50. And now, if I'm financing this property 8%, what am I going to cash flow? I'm going to cash flow negative, right? If I rent this property out for $1,500 and my cash flow is negative $216, my cash and cash return number is going to be negative 4.3%, excuse me, assuming I bought the property for 195 grand with a 67.80 rehab, assuming 25% down and 8% interest rate. Now, let's say your interest rate went down to 7%, because right now we're seeing a little compression of the spread between the 10-year treasury bond yield and your mortgage rates, right? Typically, spread's been 1.5 to 2% historically. I think last year it got to around 3% between the spread of the 10-year yield and mortgage rates, right? That's really what mortgage rates are typically doing the slow dance with. So that big move has already happened. So if you're now able to get a loan for 7%, well, guess what? That makes your numbers a little bit better, but you're still not in a positive. So how do we come up with a set of price or set of terms that makes it a deal, right? I already lowered my interest rate to 7%. I now will probably have to lower, my asking price. Let's say if I go down to 120 grand, watch what happens to this cash and cash return number. A little bit better, but still not at the 10% that I'm looking for. If I lower to 110 grand, all of a sudden it's closer to 10%. And again, it's not investment advice. We're not soliciting any investments on this call. Just showing you all the work I do every single day, analyzing the deal, and just going through the process, right? This is now a 10% return. And now this is 100, assuming I can buy the property for 110 grand, which might not be likely, right? But at least you know right now what price and set of terms might make it achieve that 10% target return, okay? All right, now that you got that in place, well, what other factors can happen, right? What if my rehab all of a sudden doubled, right? I guess I'm going to go on the property. There's some big damages in the wall that were hidden by artwork, or I moved aside the bed and I realized there's this big hole wall and now my rehab tripled. Well, if your rehab tripled to 20 grand, assuming you still have that inspection contingency on the property, well, if you buy for 110 grand, you're not going to achieve your target anymore because you just have to spend that much more money out of your pocket. So in order for you to get back up just 10%, you have to lower your asking price now further. Maybe it's 95 grand now. Boom. So even though your rehab tripled to 20 grand, it might still be a deal if you're able to lower the asking price by getting seller credits, etc., whatever that may be, so that you are only paying $95,000 for the deal, right? And that's how you mess with the different criteria so you can figure out what price, what set of terms will make this a deal, quote unquote, right? Some people might just say, well, I don't care if I break even on my cash flow as long as I'm in a high appreciating market and it's going up by 5% every single year. That could be another path that you take, but that's not necessarily the path and only path that you might take, right? So 95 grand, that's what you're looking for. $20,000, that's what you're looking for. And that's the only way you can achieve the same return, because I prioritize what I call execution risk. Sometimes you can't quantify it, but what's the chances of someone going over budget? What if your contractor screws you over and says, hey, I found something behind a wall, so this quote I gave you for 20 grand is no longer valid and you're at 20 grand in? That's where you can get really screwed over. Be careful. What if a contractor takes 3 months longer than they said it was going to take? Well, now you got 3 more months of holding costs, right? All this time and energy can become a really big time suck on your property. So just be really, really careful about how you find contractors, how you manage the risk, and ultimately decide what's the right move for you. And no one can give you advice. You have to understand what your risk tolerance is. You got to understand what your strengths are. You got to understand how good you are or how good you might be at managing a contractor to get the project to fruition. So be careful. Please, please, please. Take your time. Learn how to analyze the deals. All right. If you guys want to copy the spreadsheet, if you go to affordablehousing.io, not .com, go to the Get Deal Analysis tool. You can get a copy of the spreadsheet with your name, email, your phone number. That's the fastest way for you to get a copy of the spreadsheet. And from that point onwards, I hope you copy my homework, right? You analyze the same deal I analyzed today. Pick one part that I could have explained better, or maybe you explain better to your audience, your friends and family. It doesn't matter what it is. You do it better than I do, because that's how a rising tide lifts all boats. All right, we're here to make each other better. We're here to give each other more confidence that we know what we're doing. And I sincerely hope that you take my advice. But this is not investment advice. All right, have an amazing day, everybody. I hope you all have an amazing Monday. Thanks for joining me for day 359 of Going Live. Thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for your support. I'll be back again tomorrow for day 360. Have a good one, everybody.